She married a human for peace, then watched him tear armies apart. The war had raged for 17 cycles, and Princess Raya of the Velkhari Empire had grown weary of watching stars burn. Her people were warriors, their scales hardened by generations of conquest, their claws sharp enough to rend steel. They had never known defeat until humanity arrived at their borders with their fragile skin and impossibly short lifespans. The peace treaty was her idea. A political marriage to bind two species in an alliance neither could break. When the human delegation arrived, she expected a decorated general or a cunning diplomat. Instead, they sent Miles, a quiet man with tired eyes and rough hands who looked more like a farmer than a soldier. This is their champion? Her father had scoffed in the throne room. He doesn't even bear weapons. Miles had simply smiled, a sad thing that didn't reach his eyes. Your Majesty, I left my weapons behind a long time ago. The wedding ceremony was cold, efficient. Raya spoke her vows in perfect Terran standard, Miles in halting Velkhari. When their hands touched, she felt the warmth of his skin, so different from her own cool scales. He was gentle, respectful, and utterly unremarkable. For 6 months, peace held. Raya learned that Miles enjoyed gardening, that he hummed old Earth songs while cooking, that he woke screaming from nightmares he refused to discuss. He never spoke of his past, never mentioned the war. He seemed content to fade into obscurity as the human consort to an alien princess. Then the Krath Dominion invaded. They came from the void between stars, a scavenger empire that had watched two great powers exhaust themselves. Their fleet was massive, their intent clear: enslave both species while they were weak. The Krath had miscalculated, assuming the peace was genuine weakness rather than strategic necessity. The invasion fleet struck the border colony of Teresh IV without warning. By the time Raya received word, 15,000 Velkhari civilians were dead, and human settlements were burning. She found Miles in their quarters, standing at the window overlooking the palace gardens. His hands were steady as he fastened armor she'd never seen before, matte black covered in scars and carbon scoring. Miles? Her voice was uncertain. He turned and she barely recognized him. The quiet farmer was gone. What stood before her was something ancient and terrible, wearing her husband's face. I need to borrow a ship, he said calmly, and I need you to promise me something. What? Don't watch the combat feeds, please, she promised. She lied. Raya watched from the command center as Miles took a single pilot fighter, human design, pulled from mothballs, and flew toward the Krath invasion force. Alone. Is he insane? Her father roared. One fighter against 200 warships? But humanity's ambassador was smiling, tears streaming down her face. You don't know what you've done, she whispered. You've let a Reaper off his leash. The Krath fleet commander must have thought it was a joke. One small craft approaching their armada. They didn't even bother with fighter screens. Then Miles opened fire. What happened next violated every principle of warfare Raya had ever learned. Miles didn't fight like a pilot. He fought like physics itself had become hostile. His ship moved in ways that should have liquefied a human body, pulling maneuvers that generated forces no biological being could survive. He flew through weapons fire like a needle through cloth, and where he passed, Krath ships died. He didn't just shoot them down. He dissected them. Missiles found reactor cores with surgical precision. Railgun rounds punched through bridges where commanders cowered. He flew inside a dreadnought's shield envelope and tore it apart from within, escaping before it exploded. The Krath tried to adapt. They threw their entire fighter wing at him, 300 craft flown by their finest pilots. Miles killed them all in 18 minutes. What is he? Raya's father breathed, watching the slaughter unfold. The human ambassador's voice was hollow. During the human consolidation wars, there were soldiers who pushed themselves beyond normal limits. Genetic modifications, neural implants, combat drugs that rewrote their psychology. They called them Reapers. When the wars ended, most were deactivated or put down. A few were allowed to retire if they'd been sane enough. Miles was one of the lucky ones. Lucky? Raya felt sick. He got to stop killing. For a while. The Krath fleet broke after losing half their ships to a single fighter. They ran, scattering into FTL, abandoning their ground forces. Miles didn't pursue. He simply turned his fighter around and came home. Raya met him in the hangar. He emerged from the cockpit moving like an old man, his armor streaked with carbon scoring, Blood leaked from his nose, the cost of those impossible maneuvers. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I tried to leave that behind." She stared at the man she'd married, this creature wearing human skin who had just killed thousands. She thought of the gentle husband who grew flowers and hummed in the kitchen. Somehow, impossibly, they were the same person. "The Krath ground forces have surrendered," she said. "They're begging for mercy." "They say they didn't know what humans were capable of." Miles closed his eyes. "Most humans aren't, just the broken ones they couldn't fix. But you stopped. After the wars, you stopped. I had nothing left to fight for, then." He looked at her and she saw the man she knew beneath the monster. "Then I had something worth protecting again. I'm sorry you had to see what I really am." Raya reached out and took his hand, feeling it tremble in hers. She thought about peace and war, about the things people buried to move forward, about the terrible mathematics of violence that sometimes purchase safety for those you loved. "I see what you are," she said finally. "You're someone who carried hell inside himself so others wouldn't have to. You're someone who chose peace when war would have been easier. You're my husband." Miles pulled her close and she felt him shake with silent tears against her shoulder. The Krath never returned. Word spread quickly through the galaxy. There was peace between the Velkhari and humanity, and that peace was guarded by something ancient and terrible that humanity had tried to bury but would unchain if pressed. Miles went back to his gardens. But Raya noticed he never hummed anymore while cooking, and his nightmares returned with a vengeance. She held him through them, this broken savior who had torn armies apart to keep her safe. Peace, she learned, always had a price. Sometimes it was paid by those strong enough to bear the weight of violence so others could live gently. And sometimes, monsters chose to protect rather than destroy, not because they stopped being monsters, but because they found something worth being gentle for.